Over 2,000 years ago, a Greek philosopher named Zeno drew up a flawlessly elegant mathematical proof that motion was entirely impossible. He mathematically proved that an arrow could never reach its target because it always had to cross half the remaining distance first, and then half that distance, into infinity. On the whiteboard, Zeno was completely undefeated. His math was beautiful. It was flawless. But out in the physical world, hunters were still shooting game. Zeno's fatal flaw was confusing the infinite divisibility of numbers on a chalkboard with the actual physical properties of reality. He assumed the physical universe had to obey his elegant fractions, completely ignoring the fact that reality has actual mechanical limits. Reality has a physical floor. It has friction. It has pressure. Today, the theoretical physicists defending the standard model of cosmology, the Big Bang, dark matter, stretching space-time, are committing the exact same fallacy. They have flawlessly elegant equations that rewind the universe into a zero-dimensional point of infinite density. But just like Zeno's arrow, reality doesn't care about their whiteboard. Reality has a physical floor. Welcome to the Mechanic's Guide to the Cosmos. Today, we are not asking you to have faith in a mathematical creation myth. We are stripping away the theological physics, putting the current cosmological model to a Socratic grindstone, and conducting a forensic audit of the universe. It's time to stop worshiping the whiteboard and start analyzing the engine. If you let an accountant keep your books with the same type of tricks that theoretical physicists use to keep their favorite models alive, you would have the IRS camped out in your colon, and you would be put under the jail. When you look at the standard model of cosmology, the Big Bang, it's not actually an engineering schematic of a working machine. It's a cooked ledger. It's a balance sheet filled with imaginary assets invented purely to hide the fact that the underlying equations are fundamentally broken. Let's open the books. Let's do the cosmological audit. Ledger item number 1, the singularity. The standard model demands that all matter and energy in the universe were created from a zero-dimensional point, infinitely dense, and smaller than a single atom. It is almost literally asking us to calculate how many angels can dance on the head of a pin. If a mechanic runs a calculation and the formula results in infinity, they don't call it a physical event. They call it a math error. They know the formula is garbage at those parameters. But theoretical physicists took that mathematical breakdown and turned it into a creation myth. To believe in the singularity, you have to ignore a hard-coded law of reality called the Pauli exclusion principle. This principle states that two fundamental particles cannot occupy the same quantum state at the same time. It is the immovable brick wall of physics. Space is a physical constraint. But instead of admitting their math hit a wall, cosmologists just say, well, the laws of physics break down at the singularity. That's not a mechanical explanation. That's an I don't know, disguised as a miracle. Quantum field theory calculates the energy of empty space. When physicists ran the math to calculate the total energy of all the virtual particles in the vacuum, the result was off by a factor of 10 to the power of 120. Let me put that in perspective. The number of atoms in the entire observable universe is roughly 10 to the power of 80. Their math was off by a trillion times more than the number of atoms in the universe. If a mechanic told you the pressure inside your fuel line was 10 to the 120th power higher than the line could hold, but it didn't explode, you'd say the gauge is broken. But physicists didn't fix the gauge. They used an accounting trick called renormalization. Because their math predicted a universe that should have vaporized instantly, they arbitrarily stopped the math at a certain point and then introduced a new, infinite variable, specifically designed to subtract the first infinity from the equation. It's like an accountant realizing a company is $100 billion in debt, writing a new entry called anti-debt to perfectly cancel it out, and telling the IRS the books are balanced. Renormalization is the mathematical equivalent of cooking the books. Ledger item number 3, dark matter. Our gravitational math says the stars at the edges of galaxies are moving too fast. They should fly off into space. So, what did the whiteboard crowd do? Did they admit they don't fully understand the mechanism of gravity at a galactic scale? No. They invented an invisible, undetectable ghost called dark matter. They claim it makes up 85% of the mass of our galaxy. But let's do a mechanical check. If dark matter is 85% of our galaxy's mass, we should be swimming in it right here in our solar system. There should be roughly 1 proton's worth of invisible mass for every cubic centimeter in your living room right now. If it's providing the gravitational glue for the galaxy, it should be tugging on our space probes. But Voyager, Cassini, New Horizons, we've tracked their paths with millimeter precision for decades. There is no extra gravitational drag. We don't detect it. Dark matter isn't a physical substance. It is a massive fudged line item to zero out a broken equation. The real mechanical solution was proposed back in 1983 by Mordechai Milgram, MOND, or Modified Newtonian Dynamics. Newton's laws were built and tested on high acceleration environments right here in our solar system. But out on the outer rim of a galaxy, the gravitational acceleration drops to near zero scales. MOND demonstrates that when acceleration drops below a certain tiny threshold, gravity stops decaying strictly by the inverse square law and transitions into a simpler relation, naturally keeping those outer stars locked in their orbits without needing a single pound of invisible ghost matter. You don't need to invent invisible monsters when you simply recognize that your formula has a low acceleration limit. Ledger item number 4, cosmic inflation. To make the Big Bang work, the math requires the universe to have expanded faster than the speed of light for a fraction of a second. They call it inflation. It's an invisible force that isn't made of matter or energy, doesn't follow any known laws, and miraculously stopped just in time. You can't have a mechanical engine where the laws of physics are suspended for a few picoseconds to fix a glitch in your data. That is the suspension of causality. Look at the total amount of imaginary assets on this spreadsheet. You have zero volume singularities. You have faster than light expansion. You have 85% invisible ghost matter. You have math that is off by a factor of 10 to the 120th power, patched with anti-det subtraction. If you take a Socratic grindstone to this model, the only physical result is the red ink of a failed inspection. So, if we scrap the theological whiteboard, what does the real engine look like? If we demand physical mechanisms instead of mathematical magic, how does the cosmos actually operate? Welcome to the cyclical Big Bounce. The universe is a closed thermodynamic system that cycles through stages of expansion and compression. It doesn't need a creation myth, and it doesn't need to pop out of nothing. It is an engine running through a thermodynamic stroke. It starts with the crunch. Gravity is pulling matter inward. But as the universe compresses, it acts as a cosmic gravitational shredder. You might ask, if the universe bounces forever, why hasn't it burned through all the hydrogen and turned into a cold, dead block of iron ash? Because gravity isn't just a uniform squeeze, it's a gradient. As the big crunch accelerates, extreme tidal forces rip heavy elements violently apart at the subatomic level. The sheer mechanical violence of the crunch shatters dead iron back down into raw, basic protons and electrons, hydrogen fuel, resetting the engine for the next cycle. Eventually, all this matter hits the mechanical floor. The Pauli exclusion principle. Matter physically cannot occupy the same space. You cannot compress it into a magic singularity. The inward momentum hits the physical limit of density, and because the volume is decreasing, the pressure and temperature skyrocket. You hit the ignition point. All the matter in the universe is pushed to the nuclear fusion limit simultaneously. The result? A universe-wide thermonuclear runaway. The radiation pressure from fusing that much matter at once creates an outward force so violent it overpowers the gravitational binding. It blows the system apart in a violent rebound. This big bounce explains the ambient 2.7 Kelvin microwave background heat that we measure in space today. The whiteboard crowd says it's the ghost of the singularity. Mechanical reality says it's exactly what it looks like. The exhaust heat. The fading, cooling flash of a colossal thermonuclear detonation, slowly bleeding its energy into the void. Now, here is where the whiteboard cosmologist will try to trap you. They will point out that we look in the sky and see every galaxy moving away from us, in every direction. They claim this proves space itself is a magical fabric that is stretching, because otherwise, we would have to be at the exact center of the explosion. Classical mechanics proves them dead wrong. Imagine 3 cars leaving a starting line. Car A goes 25 miles per hour. Car B goes 50. Car C goes 100. If you are in car B, you look ahead at car C, and it is pulling away from you at 50 miles per hour. You look in your rearview mirror at car A, and it is falling behind, moving away from you in the opposite direction at 25 miles per hour. Even though you are all moving in the exact same direction, your relative perspective is that everything is moving away from you. Scale that up to a 3D kinematic explosion. The shrapnel with the highest kinetic energy moves the fastest, forming the outer edge. The slowest shrapnel stays near the center. Our galaxy is a mid-speed piece of shrapnel. If you look outward, the faster galaxies are pulling away. If you look inward, we are outrunning the slower galaxies, so they fall behind. You don't need a magical stretching fabric. You don't need a singularity. In a freely expanding cloud of debris, an observer on any particle will see all other particles moving away from them. It's called a kinematic Milne universe, and it proves that matter is just shrapnel exploding outward into a pre-existing static void. But what about redshift? When we look at distant galaxies, their light is shifted toward the red end of the spectrum. The whiteboard defenders will tell you this is because the fabric of space itself is stretching those light waves as they travel. But in our cyclical mechanical engine, redshift is simply a combination of 2 straightforward classical facts: relative velocity and survivorship bias. First, classical Doppler shift. Because the galaxy shrapnel is physically moving away from us through a pre-existing void, the light waves emitted from that receding source are naturally stretched out by that relative velocity, just like a police siren dropping in pitch as it speeds away. Second, and more importantly, we have to account for survival bias. Space isn't a magical stretching sheet, but it is a crowded minefield filled with gas, dust, and debris. The photons we actually detect in our telescopes across deep space aren't a uniform sample. They are the lucky survivors. They are the fraction of light that threaded the needle, slipping through the gaps in the cosmic clutter over billions of years. The photons that hit too much obstruction were blocked, scattered, or absorbed long ago. That is why the furthest galaxies appear as incredibly faint, dim red smudges, not because space is stretching their light out of existence, but because we are only seeing the battered, low-probability survivors that managed to make the trip. Modern cosmology has become a map-making exercise where the map is completely wrong. Every time the map fails to match the terrain, stars moving faster than expected at the edge of the galaxy. They don't say we need a new map. They instead create a sea monster that explains why you can't approach the edge. They label these monsters dark matter, or cosmic inflation, or a singularity, all the while ignoring the mountain of evidence that the universe does not match their drawing. Physics has become a secular priesthood. Researchers have built so many mathematical workarounds that they've stopped looking at the actual landscape, defending their flawed maps with the fervor of zealots. We don't need another creation myth. We need to observe the universe as it is. We must focus on the how and stop demanding that science explain the why. My model is simple. The universe operates on pressure, limits, and friction. I propose that gravity acts as a shredder, matter as shrapnel, and light as a traveler losing energy across a crowded, dusty cosmos. I am a realist, not a believer. If you claim the universe began as a point smaller than an atom, I challenge you. Show me the physical state where matter violates the exclusion principle. I may be wrong, in fact. I probably am. History shows that models built on speculation rather than observable fact eventually crumble. We were told galaxies couldn't be that mature so early. The Webb telescope proved otherwise. We were told interstellar gas was thin. Voyager 1 found it 40 times denser. We were told the heliopause was a simple teardrop. Reality proved far more complex. Whiteboard theories rarely survive contact with the terrain. Don't take their word for it, and don't take mine. Look up from the map, examine the landscape, and draw your own conclusions. If you are interested, I'll see you in the next one.